You have the most prestigious and highest-paying job in the ancient world. You are the chief advisor of the Egyptian Empire. Your boss is not just a king. He is considered a living god. He owns all the wealth the eye can see. Your life is perfect. Until one day, an exiled former prince returns from the desert holding a wooden stick. He demands that you free your entire slave labor force. Your boss laughs. You laugh. It sounds like a joke. But over the next few weeks, you will watch from the front row as the greatest superpower on Earth is absolutely obliterated. You will watch the economy collapse. Your body will be covered in incurable diseases. And on the final night, you will lose the person you love the most. This is the point of view of the man who tried to advise the most stubborn dictator in history. And this is how you survive, or try to survive, the 10 plagues of Egypt. You sit at your desk. You dip your reed stylus into the black ink. You write the daily mud brick quota on the papyrus roll. You press your bronze seal into the wet clay. The junior scribe pushes your heavy wooden door open. He is panting. He says the river is ruined. You do not look up. You tell him to stop wasting your time. The empire does not stop for rumors. He grabs your arm. He says the water is bleeding. You walk out of the palace. You walk down to the royal docks. The smell hits you before you arrive. It smells like raw copper and rotting meat. You stand at the edge of the stone pier. You look at the Nile. It is not red mud. It is thick, dark blood. Thousands of dead fish float on the surface, blistering in the morning sun. You do not care about the Hebrew God. You care about the math. This is a severe supply chain disaster. You pull a clean sheet of papyrus from your leather pouch. You calculate the immediate losses. 2 million citizens need drinking water by noon. The fishing industry is completely wiped out. Merchant ships cannot sail through this thick sludge. You grab the scribe by his linen collar. You give direct mechanical orders. First, lock the main granary doors. When the people get thirsty, they will panic and loot the grain reserves. Second, send the palace guards to the deep wells. Block civilian access. Only the royal family and your staff get clean underground water. Third, pay slaves to dig new pits in the sand near the riverbank. You walk back to your office. You need to present a report to the Pharaoh. You cannot tell him a foreign god killed his river. The Pharaoh considers himself a god. Gods do not lose. If you tell him he lost, he will execute you for treason. You sit at your desk. You write a calculated lie. You report that a massive deposit of red clay collapsed in the southern mountains. You write that the dead fish are victims of natural toxins in the mud. You call the 2 chief palace magicians into your room. You place a heavy bag of silver rings on the table. You give strict instructions. You order them to take a bowl of clean well water. You order them to drop red dye into it right in front of the Pharaoh. You need them to make this disaster look like a cheap magic trick. If the Pharaoh thinks the 2 Hebrew brothers are just street illusionists, he will laugh and ignore them. If he realizes the national economy is crashing, heads will roll. Yours will be the first. You roll up the fake report. You tie it with a linen string. You step back outside. The heat is rising. The smell of rotting fish is filling the capital. You hear women screaming in the lower merchant district. You wipe the sweat from your neck. You walk toward the grand throne room. You have exactly 5 minutes to convince a dictator that his empire is perfectly safe. You walk into the grand throne room. You hand the Pharaoh the fake river report. You watch the magicians step forward. They drop the red dye into the clean bowl of well water. The Pharaoh laughs. He dismisses the Hebrew brothers as cheap illusionists. You exhale. You think the crisis is contained. You go back to your desk. 7 days pass. The river clears, but the damage to the trade routes is permanent. Then, the second disaster hits. You wake up to the sound of squishing boots in the corridors. Frogs are covering the limestone floors of the palace. They are in the clay ovens. They are in the royal beds. You do not care about the noise. You care about the disease. When millions of frogs die under the desert sun, they will rot. Rot brings flies. Flies bring sickness. You summon the captain of the royal guard. You hand him a heavy stack of bronze weights. You tell him to pay the foreign mercenaries double their usual silver. You order them to shovel the dead frogs into massive piles outside the city walls. You tell him to burn them. The smell of burning flesh covers the capital. You write a new public edict on papyrus. You state this is simply an overpopulation of river life due to a blessing from Hapi, the river god. You stamp it with the royal seal. You lie to keep the merchant class from rioting. But the magicians cannot fake the next events. The dust of the earth turns into gnats. Then the swarms of thick flies arrive. They bite the workers. They lay eggs in the meat inside the slaughterhouses. You sit in your sealed office. You cover the windows with thick linen. You look at the latest tax ledgers. The slave labor force has stopped producing mud bricks. They are too sick to work. The monumental building projects are completely frozen. You read the reports from the royal herdsmen. 50% of the state livestock is infected by the flies. The meat supply for the upper class will vanish in 3 days. You immediately draft a secret order. You mandate the confiscation of private livestock from the lower civilian districts to feed the palace elite. You sign it using the pharaoh's name without his direct permission. You commit royal fraud to prevent a famine inside the palace. The pharaoh summons you. He is furious. He is covered in insect bites. He demands to know why the construction of his new temple has stopped. You cannot tell him his slaves are immobilized by a foreign god. You blame the architects. You say they miscalculated the limestone shipments from the southern quarries. You forge a shipping manifest right in front of him. You point to fake delays and bad weather. You leave the throne room sweating. You realize you are trapped. You are falsifying royal documents to cover up a divine judgment. You walk to the treasury. You unlock the heavy cedar doors. You take a bag of uncut lapis lazuli. You find the chief architect in the courtyard. You hand him the bag. You tell him to accept the blame for the building delays. You tell him if he speaks the truth about the plagues to the pharaoh, you will have his entire family executed for treason. You lock him in the lower dungeons. You buy yourself another week of survival. The fifth disaster strikes the herds. You walk through the royal stables. Thousands of horses, donkeys, and camels are dead in the dirt. You calculate the military and trade loss. The chariot divisions are completely grounded. You have no cavalry to suppress a southern revolt. You have no beasts of burden to move limestone from the quarries. You order the quartermaster to strip the leather, bronze fittings, and ivory from the rotting carcasses. You document the dead horses as reassigned to distant border patrols. You falsify the military ledger to keep the generals from staging a coup. You sit at your desk to stamp the new orders. Your skin burns. You look at your hands. They are covered in festering boils. You cannot hold your reed stylus properly. The pain is blinding. You wrap your arms and chest in tight linen bandages. You wear a thick wool cloak to hide the blood seeping through the cloth. You walk into the administrative hall. Half the desks are empty. The chief priests of the healing goddess are waiting for you. They beg you to open the royal vaults for imported medicinal herbs. You deny their requests. You order the guards to lock the state medicine cabinets. You reserve the remaining clean ointments strictly for yourself and the royal family. You let the lower city suffer. You hear a deafening roar outside. You look through the narrow stone window. Blocks of ice and fire are falling from the sky. The hail smashes the flax and barley fields to pieces. It crushes the slaves and cattle caught in the open. You watch the foundation of the national economy get pulverized into wet mud. You run down to the lower archives. You pull the agricultural tax projections for the next 10 years. You take your ink and cross out every single number. The empire is officially bankrupt. The nation will starve by winter. You authorize the immediate release of emergency gold reserves. You hire foreign mercenaries to act as secret envoys. You send them south to buy grain from Nubia. You order them to disguise themselves as private merchants. If the Nubians realize Egypt is weak and starving, they will invade. The pharaoh summons the court. He refuses to yield. He screams at the Hebrew brothers. You stand behind the throne. You are sweating through your bandages. You step forward and whisper to the pharaoh. You tell him the country is destroyed. You present the raw economic numbers. You beg him to let the slaves go to save the supply chain. He threatens to have you beheaded for cowardice. The next morning, the sky turns black. Millions of locusts descend on the capital. They consume every green stalk left by the hail. They strip the fruit from the trees. You hear the deafening sound of millions of jaws chewing. You lock yourself in the treasury vault. You stare at the massive piles of gold and silver. You realize gold is completely worthless if there is no food left on the continent to buy. You sit on the cold stone floor. You realize the bureaucracy has failed. You pull out a blank papyrus. You begin drafting a list of border guards to bribe. You secure a route to the eastern desert. You prepare to abandon your god king. You finish writing the bribe list. You blow out the oil lamp to save fuel. Then, the sun disappears completely. It is not a storm cloud. It is a physical darkness. You cannot see your own hands. You cannot read your ledgers. You cannot find the door to the vault. For 3 days, the entire Egyptian government ceases to exist. No taxes are collected. No grain is moved. Men sit in the pitch black, screaming. You realize the ultimate power of a state is illusion. Without light, you have no authority. The light returns on the 4th day. You are dehydrated and starving. The Pharaoh summons you to the throne room. You stand next to him. You hear the Hebrew leader deliver the final ultimatum. At midnight, every firstborn son in Egypt will die. The Pharaoh dismisses the threat. He orders the guards to throw the Hebrew out. You do not laugh this time. You run to the merchant quarter. You find a Hebrew slave. You hand him a solid gold armband. You demand a lamb. He refuses. You draw your bronze dagger. You threaten to kill him. He looks at you with pity and hands you a slaughtered sheep. You carry the carcass back to your stone estate. You have a firstborn son. He is 7 years old. He is the heir to your estate. You take a branch of hyssop. You dip it in the bowl of sheep's blood. You walk to your front door. You stop. You look down the street. The royal guards are watching. If you mark your door with the blood of the Hebrew ritual, you are committing high treason. The penalty is impalement. If you do not mark your door, your son dies. You drop the branch. You are the chief advisor. You cannot break the law in front of the royal guard. You go inside. You lock the heavy wooden door. You slide the bronze bolt into place. You put your son in the center room. You surround him with 4 armed mercenaries. You pay them their weight in silver to stand watch. You sit in a chair facing the door. You hold your dagger. You wait for the midnight watch. The water clock drips. Midnight strikes. A scream echoes from the house next door. Then another from the street. Then a collective howl rises from the entire capital. Your heavy wooden door does not open. The bronze bolt does not move. The mercenaries do not draw their swords, but your son falls to the stone floor. He stops breathing. You drop your dagger. You do not try to wake him. You know the math. The transaction is complete. You paid with your bloodline to keep your job. Before dawn, a palace runner bangs on your door. The Pharaoh summons you. You walk through streets filled with dead bodies and screaming mothers. You enter the throne room. The Pharaoh is holding his dead heir. He is broken. He gives you a final humiliating order. You walk to the state treasury. You unlock the massive cedar doors. You authorize the release of all state silver, gold jewelry, and fine linen. You hand the entire wealth of the Egyptian empire to the departing Hebrew slaves. You pay them to leave. You stand in the empty vault. You're still the chief advisor. You still wear the linen robes of power. But there is no money. There is no army. There is no heir. You survive the 10 plagues, but you are the warden of a graveyard.